In the orbit above Earth, silence should have meant peace. But what if silence could speak? I'm Elias Trent, a communications engineer, assigned to monitor dead satellites. For years, nothing but static. Until tonight, the graveyard above started whispering back. Voices human, emotional, impossible, calling from machines that should be long gone. Now I listen to them, because somewhere in that static the forgotten are still waiting to be heard. Elias Trent sat alone in the dim glow of the communications lab, the hum of cooling fans and the soft tapping of keys his only companions. The monitors before him flickered with streams of data, a cascade of satellite telemetry and radio frequencies that formed the very pulse of the space above. For years, his work had been a quiet routine: monitor, maintain, archive. But tonight, something was different, something impossible. His lean frame leaned in closer to the array of screens, eyes sharp behind dark-rimmed glasses. A faint crackle emerged from his headphones, a sporadic burst of static that gradually morphed into a pattern, a rhythm. Elias's heart quickened. He adjusted the frequency, fine-tuning the receiver with meticulous care, until the noise resolved into a ghostly whisper. It was unmistakably a signal, but from where? The satellite graveyard, a silent expanse of defunct machines orbiting Earth, was supposed to be a tome, dead and forgotten. The holographic display in front of him shimmered, revealing a three-dimensional map of the orbiting debris. Each dot represented a satellite long since decommissioned, their metal husks drifting endlessly in the cold vacuum. Yet from this cosmic graveyard, a faint pulse had emerged, a flicker of life in the silence. Elias's fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard as he initiated a recording sequence. "This can't be right," he muttered, eyes darting between the waveforms and spectral analyses. The transmissions were neither random noise nor residual echoes. They were coherent, layered with fragments of voices and data packets that defied explanation. He spoke aloud, breaking the solitude that had wrapped around him like a shroud. "Come on, what are you?" His voice sounded foreign in the empty lab, a rare crack in his usual emotional reserve. The signals responded with a faint modulation, a tantalizing pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Hours slipped by unnoticed as Elias immersed himself in the puzzle. The loneliness of the room deepened, yet the eerie companionship of the signals filled the void, a fragile connection spanning the gulf between Earth and the silent debris above. Every fragment he decoded hinted at stories long lost, snippets of conversations, cryptic codes, moments frozen in time. The satellites, it seemed, carried more than metal and circuits. They held echoes of human presence, memories preserved in the cold expanse beyond. As dawn crept over the horizon, Elias leaned back, exhaustion etched into his lean features. The mystery had only deepened, but so had his resolve. Somewhere in the orbiting silence, forgotten voices waited, and he would listen. The journey had begun. Elias Trent sat alone in the subdued light of his cramped communications lab. The room cluttered with an array of screens and audio equipment humming softly like a heartbeat against the oppressive quiet. The faint glow of his monitors bathed his lean frame in a pale blue, illuminating the dark-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. Outside the window, the city's distant lights blurred into an indifferent haze, but Elias's focus was entirely inward, locked onto the ephemeral signals emanating from the silent satellite graveyard orbiting Earth. He adjusted a dial and leaned closer to the speakers, the static crackling and shifting as he filtered overlapping transmissions. The voices, fragmented and faint, began to emerge from the noise snatches of conversation, snippets of music, and cryptic messages tangled together like threads in a frayed tapestry. Each fragment was a ghost, a residual echo of lives and moments long past, yet somehow still alive in the cold vacuum above. "Tara, isolate the segment at 12:47 frequency again," Elias commanded softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The AI assistant responded with a calm, modulated tone. "Reprocessing now. Pattern indicates intermittent layering with a secondary frequency at 12:49, possibly a cross-channel interference or intentional multiplexing." Elias nodded, his fingers dancing across the keyboard as he adjusted the filters. The screen flickered, and clearer voices began to take shape. A woman's voice, distant and wary, recited coordinates and fragmented mission logs. A man's laughter, brittle and tentative, overlaid with the faint melody of a song Elias recognized from decades-old broadcasts. The layers of sound intertwined, each piece a puzzle fragment begging to be assembled. Hours slipped by unnoticed as Elias immersed himself in the transmissions. The technical challenge exhilarated him. His expertise allowed him to tease meaning from chaos, to breathe life into these spectral voices. Yet with every decoded message, a heavy weight settled deeper in his chest. The loneliness embedded within the technology was palpable. These satellites, once vibrant hubs of communication and human endeavor, now drifting aimlessly, their voices flickering like dying embers against the vast, uncaring void. A sudden melodic phrase pierced the static, a lullaby Elias's mother used to sing. His breath caught. The unexpected nostalgia was a sharp pang, stirring memories of his lost friend, the one who had vanished in a mission years ago. The lab felt suddenly colder, the silence around him more profound. He pressed a hand to the console, grounding himself against the swell of melancholy. "Tara," Elias murmured, "can you cross-reference the vocal patterns with known mission logs?" "Affirmative," came the response. Preliminary analysis suggests multiple users transmitting from different satellites within the graveyard. The voices align with historical mission personnel data, including Captain Jonas Havel and other unregistered entities. Elias's heart quickened. The revelation deepened the mystery. These were not random signals, but preserved memories, broadcast unintentionally or perhaps by design, echoing across time and space. The persistence of memory-human connection defying the entropy of cosmic abandonment. He paused the playback and stared at the wavering waveforms, whispering to the empty room, "You still out there? You still speaking?" The hours turned into days. Elias's routine grew obsessive. He recorded every fragment, catalogued every voice, and spoke aloud his interpretations as if to bridge the solitude that gnawed at him. His colleagues noticed his withdrawal. Mara Lynn had voiced concern the day before, urging him to step outside, to reconnect with the living. But Elias remained tethered to the satellite's mournful chorus, compelled by the fragile hope that understanding these voices might heal some part of his own fractured isolation. Late one night, as rain streaked the lab window, Elias isolated a transmission that seemed different, a faint but clear plea, fragmented yet unmistakably human. The voice trembled through the static. "Remember us, don't let us fade." A shiver ran down Elias's spine. The satellite graveyard was not merely a tomb of forgotten technology. It was a repository of memory, a cosmic echo chamber of humanity's reach and loss. The loneliness was not just his own, it was writ large in the silence of space, in the persistent ghosts orbiting above. He leaned back, exhausted yet resolute. The path ahead was unclear, but the fragments of the past had spoken. Elias knew he would answer their call, no matter the cost. His fingers hovered over the console, ready to dive deeper into the abyss of forgotten voices, as the night outside stretched endlessly into the void. The communications lab was a sanctuary cluttered with tangled cables, humming servers, and the constant flicker of screens. Elias Trent sat motionless in front of a console, his gaze locked on the wavering line of a transmission waveform. His hands were stained with the residue of countless nights spent poring over signals that no one else seemed to hear. The room's muted glow reflected off his dark-rimmed glasses, casting shadows that deepened the hollowness in his eyes. "Elias," a voice interrupted the silence, gentle but insistent. Mara Lynn stood at the threshold, her warm smile tinged with concern. "You've been at this for hours. You need to take a break." He didn't look up immediately, fingers tapping an erratic rhythm on the desk. "I'm close, Mara. There's something in these transmissions. They're not just memories, they re-alive somehow." Mara stepped closer, her hands clasped in front of her. "I get that it's important. But you re-burning yourself out. You haven't even returned my calls or left the lab for days. You need to reconnect with people, with the world." Elias finally raised his eyes, meeting hers with a fleeting flicker of vulnerability. "I don't know how," she sighed softly, pulling up a chair beside him. "Maybe start small, take a walk, have a meal, talk to someone who isn't a waveform." He chuckled bitterly, the sound hollow. "It's not that simple. These voices, they're all I've got right now." Mara's gaze softened, understanding but unyielding. "And what if those voices disappear? What then?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any signal Elias had ever decoded. Later that evening, Elias stood by the lab's large window, staring out at the sprawling cityscape glittering beneath the night sky. The neon lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors, but the beauty was lost on him. His mind replayed the fragmented transmissions, fleeting voices from satellites long dead, or so everyone believed. He spoke softly, words meant only for himself. "Captain Havel, can you hear me?" His reflection merged with the city lights, a ghost trapped between two worlds, one of human connection and one of endless cosmic silence. Mara's words echoed in his mind, a lifeline he couldn't yet grasp. He turned back to his console, the faint hum of the satellite transmissions filling the room like whispers from another time. At the small kitchenette, Mara prepared 2 cups of tea, her hand steady despite the worry knotting her stomach. She carried one to Elias, who had retreated from the console to the tiny nook behind the lab. He accepted the cup with a nod but said little. "You are not alone, Elias," she said softly, trying to bridge the growing gulf between them. He looked up, eyes searching hers as if seeking proof. "Sometimes I wonder if loneliness is the price we pay for knowing too much." "Maybe," Mara replied, "but it doesn't have to be the end of the story." The hours slipped by with quiet conversation, fragments of normalcy amid the storm of obsession. Yet when Mara left, Elias returned to his station, the room empty save for the ghostly echoes of the satellites. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard, a silent battle raging within. Could he let go? Could he step back from the edge of his growing fixation? Or was he destined to become a guardian of forgotten voices, alone in the vast orbit of human memory? The room darkened as the city outside fell asleep, but Elias's mind remained restless. The transmissions whispered on, a melancholic symphony that promised answers but demanded sacrifice. And in that silence between signals, Elias felt the ache of a yearning that technology could never fully soothe. He whispered once more, barely audible, "I'm listening." The night held its breath, waiting for the next echo to emerge from the void. The dim hum of the lab was a constant companion to Elias Trent, a subtle backdrop to the endless nights spent in front of glowing monitors and tangled wires. Tonight, the usual static of the satellite graveyard was punctuated by something new, something unmistakably human. The voice crackled through the speakers, rough and wary, with the unmistakable cadence of a man speaking from a place far removed from the sterile silence of Elias's lab. It was the voice of Captain Jonas Havel. At first, Elias thought it was a glitch, a fragment of an old recording carelessly embedded in the satellite transmissions. But as he adjusted the filters and fine-tuned the signal, the voice grew clearer, more distinct. "Mission log, day 152, the captain's voice began, steady but laced with fatigue. "Systems are failing, but the crew remains resolute. We carry the hopes of many, even as the stars grow distant." The weight of the words settled heavily in the room. Elias felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the palpable presence of a story that had refused to fade. He leaned closer to the speakers, the faint hiss of static underscoring the captain's solemn reflections. These were no mere data packets lost to time. This was a testament of human endurance, preserved against the vast indifference of space. Elias pulled up the archival footage linked to the transmissions, the screen flickering until a rugged figure appeared, a man in a space suit, eyes steady but shadowed by the unknown. Captain Havel's face was etched with the gravity of command and the silent burden of a mission that had slipped beyond reach. The footage was grainy, but every frame was a portal to a forgotten past, a story orbiting silently above Earth. He paused the video, the captain's gaze seeming to meet his across the years. For a moment, the lab was no longer just a room filled with wires and screens. It was a bridge between eras, between loneliness and connection. Elias's fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant yet driven. He began piecing together the fragments of transmissions, snatches of conversation, coded messages, and personal logs. Each decoded phrase was a thread weaving into the larger tapestry of the lost mission. Hours passed unnoticed. The world outside the lab faded until all that remained was the soft glow of monitors and the persistent whisper of voices long silenced. Elias recorded every transmission obsessively, speaking aloud as he deciphered cryptic codes, his voice a solitary echo in the quiet room. "Day 153, he murmured, "we hold on for each other, even as the void closes in." The human element within the transmissions stirred something deep inside Elias, an ache born from his own solitude and the shared loneliness of those voices trapped in orbit. He was no longer just an observer but a guardian of these lost histories, a keeper of memories that technology alone could not erase. Yet with every revelation, the weight of the silent void pressed heavier. The relentless entropy threatened to swallow these stories whole, pushing Elias to the brink of obsession. How long could he chase ghosts in the static before losing himself entirely? The question lingered as he prepared to delve even deeper into the mysteries that awaited him among the forgotten satellites. As the chapter drew to a close, the connection to Captain Jonas Havel was no longer a mere curiosity, it was a lifeline. Elias understood that in these echoes lay the fragile persistence of memory, a beacon against the vast, indifferent silence of space. And in that understanding, his journey truly began. Elias sat motionless in his dimly lit lab, the pale blue glow of monitors casting spectral shadows across his gaunt face. The usual hum of electronic equipment had fallen away to a deafening silence. For a moment, even the faintest static from the satellite graveyard ceased, as if the cosmos itself held its breath. He adjusted the headphones against his ears, hoping to catch even the faintest whisper of signal, but there was nothing. The silence was not merely absence, it was a presence, thick and suffocating, pressing against his mind with a cold, invisible weight. He had heard of the silent void before, not as a physical entity, but as a concept, a creeping entropy that erases not just data, but memory, connection, and existence itself. The satellites he monitored were relics, drifting tombstones in orbit, their transmissions fading like ghosts. And now, that void seemed to reach out, threatening to swallow even his fragile grasp on the echoes of the past. Leaning back, Elias closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. The lab around him felt smaller, more claustrophobic, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The faces of lost voices hovered in his mind, Captain Jonas Havel's somber logs, fragmented laughter from unknown broadcasters, the soft, trembling farewell of an astronaut long gone. They were slipping away, vanishing into the abyss like stars extinguished one by one. The night stretched on, and with it, Elias's thoughts spiraled deeper into the void. He recalled the accident, the mission that claimed his closest friend, a sharp rupture in his world that had driven him into this solitary work. The silence after that loss had been absolute, and now, orbiting thousands of miles above, the satellites seemed to echo that same emptiness. A cosmic cemetery where memories decayed alongside metal and circuits. Suddenly, the monitors flickered. A weak signal emerged from the static, a faint pulse, almost imperceptible. Elias's heart raced as he adjusted frequencies, chasing the elusive thread of life amid the dead. But the signal wavered, then faded again, leaving behind the oppressive quiet. Visions blurred the edges of his consciousness, whispers swallowed by darkness, voices dissolving into nothingness. The silent void was no longer just a metaphor. It was a living terror, a force gnawing at the edges of reality and mind. Elias felt it claw at his resolve, threatening to consume the fragile connections he had painstakingly pieced together. Desperation pushed him to the window. Outside, the night was a vast canvas of stars, cold and indifferent. Somewhere beyond, the satellites drifted silently, their ghostly orbits a testament to forgotten lives and lost stories. The void between those points of light was infinite, and within it, the silence was absolute. A shiver ran down Elias's spine as the weight of solitude settled deep within him. Yet beneath the despair, a fragile ember of determination flickered. He could not let these voices vanish into oblivion. They were the last threads tying humanity to its forgotten past, the only proof that amidst the vast loneliness, connection had once existed. Returning to his console, Elias placed a steady hand on the controls, whispering into the void, "I will keep you alive. I will hold your memories against the silence." The lab filled once more with the low hum of machines awakening, and though the signals remained faint, his vow carved a fragile sanctuary in the encroaching darkness. The silent void might be vast and merciless, but Elias was resolved to be its defiant guardian. In the heart of the cosmic graveyard, the fight for memory had only just begun. The night stretched on, the silence both enemy and companion, as Elias prepared for the long vigil ahead. Somewhere beyond, the voices waited, lost but not yet gone. And so, in the cold shadow of the silent void, a solitary figure held fast to the fragile light of remembrance. Defying the endless night, the room was dim, bathed only in the pale, flickering light cast by the rows of monitors and the soft glow of a single desk lamp. Elias Trent sat hunched over his cluttered workspace, shoulders tense, eyes shadowed beneath dark-rimmed glasses that caught the scattered light like dull mirrors. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating as a familiar, aching memory stirred within him. On the desk, half buried beneath tangled cables and printed signal waveforms, lay a worn photograph, edges frayed, the image faded but unmistakable. It was a picture of his family, a relic from a time when laughter had filled rooms and conversations had not been reduced to cold silences. His gaze lingered on the photograph, tracing the faces etched in grainy sepia. His mother, smiling gently. His younger sister, eyes bright with mischief. And himself, younger and less burdened by the weight of solitude. But it was not the family photo that held his attention most. It was the smaller, crumpled snapshot beside it, a portrait of a friend no longer alive. A man with easy laughter, steady hands, and a fatal mission etched into the stars. The memory came unbidden, vivid and sharp. Elias closed his eyes, and the silence of his apartment was pierced by the ghostly echo of a voice, faint but persistent. The last transmission from the ill-fated space mission, the crackle of static, a whispered farewell carried across the void. The moment replayed in his mind like a looping record, the tremor in his friend's voice, the desperate hope, the final words caught between life and oblivion. It was a sound that had haunted Elias since that day, a wound that refused to heal. He exhaled slowly, the breath catching slightly as he opened his eyes to the cold blue glow of the monitors. The live transmissions from the satellite graveyard pulsed steadily, their eerie voices threading through the silence like fragile strands of forgotten history. For Elias, these signals were more than mere data, they were echoes of life, fragments of human stories suspended in the void, refusing to die. A soft knock at the doorframe broke his reverie. Mara Lynn stood there, her warm smile gentle, but tinged with concern. She wore her usual practical attire, comfortable jeans, and a simple blouse, but her eyes held an urgency that Elias could not ignore. "Elias," she said quietly, stepping inside, "you've been at this for hours. You need to take a break, step outside, breathe. Remember there's a world beyond these screens." He looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the walls he had built around himself seemed to tremble, the isolation threatening to crack. Yet the weight of his grief and obsession anchored him firmly in place. "I can't," he replied, voice low and strained. "Not yet. There's something here. Something I need to understand." Mara approached the desk, her fingers lightly brushing a tangled wire, then resting on a console. "I know this mystery calls to you, but you're losing yourself in it. Remember who you are, remember the people who still care. Elias swallowed hard, a faint smile ghosting across his lips, brittle and fragile, like glass. I remember. But right now, it's just me and the silence out there. His eyes flickered back to the monitors, the endless blackness of space mirrored in their depths. As Mara stepped back, respecting his space but not his solitude, Elias felt the ache of loneliness deepen. He was caught between two worlds, the tangible warmth of human connection just beyond reach, and the cold, endless expanse of cosmic memories whispering through the satellite's signals. The weight of his past pressed heavily against him. The loss of his friend, the estrangement from his family, the long nights spent decoding transmissions that might hold fragments of forgotten lives, all these threads wove together into a tapestry of yearning and solitude. Yet beneath the sorrow, a quiet determination stirred. Elias knew that to uncover the truth behind the transmissions, he would have to confront not only the mysteries of the satellites, but the fractured memories within himself. As the night deepened, the satellite signals continued their haunting chorus. Elias leaned closer to the console, voice barely a whisper as he spoke aloud, decoding the cryptic fragments that danced like ghosts across the screen. Outside the window, the city lights flickered, distant and indifferent, a reminder of a world moving on while he remained suspended in silence. The door to the lab closed softly behind Mara's departing footsteps, leaving Elias alone once more. Yet in that solitude, a fragile seed of hope took root. Somewhere within the tangled echoes of the satellites, amidst the cosmic debris and fading voices, there was a connection waiting to be reclaimed. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could reach through the void to touch even the loneliest of hearts. With a steadying breath, Elias returned to his work, the past and present converging in the silent orbit of forgotten voices. The communications lab was a cavern of humming machines and blinking lights, casting a pale glow over Elias Trent's lean figure hunched over a tangled mess of cables and monitors. The faint, erratic static that had become his obsession filled the air, punctuated only by the soft clicks and beeps of processing equipment. He adjusted the settings again, fingers moving with practiced precision, eyes scanning the flickering waveforms that danced across the screens. Today, however, he was not alone. Linus Gray, a senior scientist with an imposing presence, stood nearby, arms crossed and expression unreadable beneath a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. The older man's lab coat was spotless, his demeanor stern but not without a hint of curiosity. Elias had long anticipated this moment, the meeting of his relentless pursuit and Linus' cautious skepticism. Linus began, his voice steady. What you're proposing defies much of what we understand about signal degradation over time. These satellites have been dead for decades. Any transmission you're rehearing is likely just noise, echoes bouncing in the void. Elias met his gaze, calm but unwavering. I understand the improbability, Linus. But the patterns, the modulation, there's something deliberate in these signals. I can't explain it yet, but I'm certain it's not random static. Linus sighed, pacing slowly to the nearest console. Show me then. Let's see if your hypothesis holds under scrutiny. Together, they delved into the heart of the data archives, a sprawling digital repository of signals collected from the silent satellite graveyard orbiting Earth. Elias guided Linus through the labyrinthine layers of transmissions, highlighting fragments that defied conventional explanations. His voice was low but passionate as he explained the filtering techniques he had developed, the algorithms that teased meaning from chaos. Linus's skepticism was palpable, but so was his growing intrigue. Your filters are impressive, he admitted grudgingly, though I worry about confirmation bias. Are we seeing what we want to see? Elias shook his head. I've cross-checked every fragment. The patterns persist beyond coincidence. Listen. He adjusted the parameters once more. The room was filled with a sudden surge of crackling noise, sharp static that hissed before settling into something faintly resembling a human voice. The words were fragmented and broken, but unmistakably human. Linus's eyes narrowed as he leaned closer to the speaker. Well, I'll be damned. For the first time, a genuine smile flickered across his features, a rare crack in his professional reserve. Encouraged, Elias dove deeper, and the two worked side by side, adjusting equipment, recalibrating sensors, and refining their methods. The air grew thick with tension and anticipation. Every breakthrough was a step further into the unknown, a step Elias was both eager and wary to take. As clearer voices emerged from the depths of the static, Elias felt a swell of emotions, exhilaration, hope, and a gnawing loneliness that the voices only heightened. These fragments were more than data. They were echoes of lives once lived, stories trapped in orbit, waiting for someone to listen. Through long hours and countless adjustments, the collaboration forged a fragile bridge between skepticism and belief. Gray's practical insights tempered Elias's obsessive streak, grounding the investigation in rigorous science. Yet the mystery only deepened, pulling Elias further into the silent graveyard among the stars. Night after night, the lab became a sanctuary of light and sound amid the vast emptiness of space and solitude. Elias's fingers trembled slightly as he recorded each new fragment, speaking softly to himself as he tried to decipher the voices that refused to fade. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, eyes fixed on the glowing screens. "There's more out there waiting. We just have to listen." And listen he would, even as the shadows lengthened, and the weight of the silent void pressed ever closer. Reminding him that some mysteries come at a cost, one he was only beginning to understand. The breakthrough in signal clarity was a beacon, but also a warning. The orbiting graveyard was not just a place of desolation. It was alive with memories, and Elias stood at the threshold of a discovery that could change everything or consume him entirely. As the lab settled into a quiet hum, Elias glanced at Linus, who was already immersed in recalibrating the filters. Despite their differences, the unspoken understanding between them was clear. This was a journey neither could walk alone. Outside, the silent satellites continued their endless orbit, spinning cold tales in the dark. Inside, a new chapter was unfolding, one of hope, doubt, and the fragile persistence of memory against the void. The question lingered in Elias's mind: how far was he willing to go to unravel the voices that refused to die? And more importantly, what would he find when he finally did? The answers were waiting, just beyond the static. The night deepened, and the lab's monitors flickered softly. Elias's gaze never wavered, locked onto the faint signals that had become his obsession. Somewhere amid the cosmic debris, the echoes of forgotten voices whispered their secrets, and Elias was determined to listen no matter the cost. The humming of the servers filled the room with a steady, almost hypnotic drone, punctuated only by the occasional blinking of small indicator lights on the array of communication devices scattered across the lab. Elias Trent leaned closer to the holographic interface floating above his desk, his dark-rimmed glasses catching the pale blue glow as lines of code and signal patterns streamed across the translucent display. Beside him, the soft, calm voice of Tara, his assistant, broke the silence. Analysis complete, Elias, Tara intuned, her voice modulated to be soothing yet precise. The transmissions show a series of anomalous fluctuations inconsistent with standard satellite telemetry. Signal patterns exhibit adaptive frequency modulations, suggesting non-random behavior. Would you like a detailed report? Elias rubbed the bridge of his nose, the fatigue from countless hours of monitoring weighing heavily on him. Yes, Tara. Run the pattern correlation with previous datasets and cross-reference with known satellite behaviors. As Tara processed the request, Elias allowed his mind to wander briefly, the sterile walls of the lab closing in around him. Outside, the Earth spun silently beneath layers of atmosphere, while countless pieces of cosmic detritus defunct satellites. Fragments from long-forgotten missions drifted aimlessly in the silent void. It was from this graveyard that the enigmatic transmissions emerged, a whisper from the past that refused to fade. The A's voice returned, crisp and clear. Correlation complete. The adaptive modulations correspond with signals recorded during active satellite operations, but include additional layers of encrypted data that do not match any known protocols. Hypothesis: the satellites may be engaged in a form of autonomous signal processing or memory preservation beyond their originally intended parameters. Elias' heart quickened. Memory preservation. You mean the satellites could be storing and transmitting fragments of their operational histories, or even user data autonomously? Affirmative, Tara replied. Further, the encrypted data shows signs of dynamic restructuring, which may indicate a reactive process to signal degradation or external interference. He replayed several segments of the transmissions, the ethereal voices and static-laden fragments weaving a tapestry of lost time and forgotten stories. The voice of Captain Jonas Havel had appeared again recently, his logs growing more frequent and detailed. Yet these new findings hinted at something far more profound. The satellites might not be merely broadcasting recorded data, but actively sustaining a form of memory or consciousness. Elias spoke aloud, as much to himself as to Tara. Could these echoes be more than just remnants? Might they be evolving, adapting? Tara responded without hesitation. Current data supports the possibility. The satellites may represent a nascent form of technological persistence, where memory and data persist through adaptive signal modulation despite physical decay. The implications staggered Elias. If true, this challenged fundamental assumptions about the finality of technological death and the permanence of memory. Yet it also deepened his sense of isolation. These satellites, drifting silently in orbit, sustained their own ghostly existence, while he remained earthbound, haunted by solitude. Hours passed in a trance of analysis and quiet contemplation. Tara's voice was the only companion in the sterile lab, a bridge between man and machine, past and present. Elias realized that the A was not just a tool, but a confessor for his obsession, a sounding board for his melancholic yearning. As dawn approached, painting the sky with pale hues, Elias prepared a new line of inquiry. Tara, can you simulate potential communication protocols that might elicit a response from these satellites? Initiating simulation, Tara confirmed. The room filled with soft pulses and modulated beeps, an attempt to reach out across the void, to touch the silent legacy orbiting above. Elias watched the data streams, waiting, hoping for a sign that the forgotten voices might answer back. Outside, the stars remained indifferent, distant witnesses to a solitary man's quest to connect with echoes of a lost humanity. Yet within the lab, amidst the interplay of human longing and artificial intellect, a fragile hope flickered, a hope born from the intersection of loneliness and technology, memory and oblivion. The quiet was broken again by Tara's voice. Simulation complete, awaiting response. Elias's breath caught. Somewhere overhead, in the silent graveyard of satellites, the unknown waited to reply. The night stretched on, drawing him deeper into the mystery, a tapestry woven from code, memory, and the aching desire to hear the voices that time sought to erase. And so, in this liminal space between man and machine, past and present, Elias's journey continued, driven by the soft, persistent murmur of forgotten voices and the enigmatic intelligence of a silent companion named Tara. But as the signals pulsed faintly through the darkness, a question lingered in Elias's mind. How far would he go to uncover what lay beyond the silence? The answer remained as elusive as the satellites themselves, drifting endlessly in the cold orbit of forgotten dreams. The hum of the servers continued, steady and unyielding, as the night unfolded into uncertainty, promise, and the bittersweet ache of connection, just out of reach. The lab was cloaked in the muted glow of countless monitors, their flickering screens casting pale light on the cluttered desk where Elias Trent sat, hunched forward with an intensity born of sleepless nights and restless curiosity. The air was thick with the hum of machine servers cycling through data, antennas keeping vigil on the silent satellite graveyard orbiting above. Elias' fingers danced nervously over the keyboard, eyes scanning lines of code and frequency graphs as he chased the faintest hint of life in the static. For weeks, he had been captivated by the strange transmissions emanating from satellites long declared defunct. Their physical shells now nothing more than cosmic debris drifting endlessly around Earth. Initially, the signals had seemed like mere noise-garbled echoes and fading bursts of recorded broadcasts. But tonight, something shifted. A pattern emerged from the chaos, a rhythmic pulse interspersed with irregular bursts that defied explanation. Elias leaned closer, his breath catching as he isolated a sequence that repeated with subtle variations, too precise to be random noise or interference. "Tara," he whispered, invoking the AI assistant embedded within his system, "run a deep analysis on this signal pattern. Cross-reference with archival data and check for temporal anomalies." The AI responded with its usual calm efficiency, its synthesized voice threading through the silence with a clinical precision. Analyzing. Signal exhibits non-random modulation inconsistent with prior recorded transmissions. Probability of live broadcast 89.7%. Further decoding recommended. Elias' heart quickened. The possibility that these satellites were not mere repositories of static memory, but active broadcasters, challenged everything he believed. His mind raced through the implications. Had some unknown mechanism preserved these signals? Or was there something more enigmatic, a form of persistent memory or consciousness lingering within the hardware? He replayed the transmissions, each iteration peeling back layers of sound, fragments of voices, bursts of code, faint emotional inflections encoded in the modulation. The voice of a woman speaking softly in a language half-remembered, the crackle of a command console, a distant mechanical beep punctuating the silence. Elias spoke aloud, the words tumbling from his lips in a litany of questions and theories, not just recorded, acted alive, in a way. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Outside, the night deepened into a velvet darkness punctuated by distant city lights. Inside, the lab was a sanctuary of solitude and obsession. The more Elias uncovered, the more the boundary between his own isolation and the silent chorus of satellites blurred. He felt a kinship with these forgotten voices, lost, lingering, yearning to be heard. Tara interrupted his reverie again, presenting a visualization of signal flux over time. Patterns suggest adaptive transmission protocols, possibly influenced by environmental factors or residual user data. Elias nodded, absorbing the revelation. The satellites were not simply drifting toms but dynamic nodes, their transmissions alive with the echoes of human presence. This knowledge was exhilarating and terrifying. It promised connection but threatened to deepen his solitude as he sank further into the mystery. He paused, staring at the scrolling data, the weight of the silent void pressing against his thoughts. Could he bridge the distance between the living and the forgotten? Was he prepared to confront the loneliness embedded in this cosmic graveyard? As the first light of dawn crept into the lab, Elias sat back, a fragile smile touching his lips. The satellites were speaking. He would listen no matter the cost. The journey into the orbit of forgotten voices had truly begun. Elias Trent sat in the dim glow of his communication lab, the cold hum of the equipment filling the silence that had become his closest companion. The room was cluttered with tangled wires, blinking consoles, and scattered notes scribbled hastily in a spiral notebook. Yet tonight, amidst the chaos of technology, a single thread of clarity emerged, a voice, crackling through the static, fragile but unmistakably human. "This is Captain Jonas Havel, log entry 47. The voice began, raspy but resolute, layered with the unmistakable weight of isolation and determination. Elias adjusted his headset, leaning closer to the speaker, as the transmission unfolded like a ghostly whisper from the past. The voice painted images of a mission long lost, of stars charted and silence endured. Each word was a shard of history, piercing the veil of cosmic debris that surrounded Earth. Elias's fingers trembled as he paused the recording, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and melancholy. Here was not just data or cold signals, but a living memory frozen in time, yet somehow alive beyond the satellite's physical decay. He replayed the clip, this time letting the voice wash over him fully. Captain Havel spoke of camaraderie, of hope in the face of uncertainty, and of the creeping dread that settled when silence outlasts all communication. We are but echoes now, Havel's voice trembled. But these echoes are all that remain of who we were. Remember us, remember this. Elias exhaled, the weight of those words settling deep within him. He glanced up at the holographic display flickering before him, revealing archival footage of the captain. The image was grainy but vivid enough to show a man worn by time and circumstance, eyes fixed forward with a stoic resolve that belied the vulnerability in his tone. The sight stirred something long dormant in Elias, a recognition of shared solitude. Here was a man trapped in the vastness of space, just as Elias felt trapped in the silence of his own existence. Mara, Elias called softly, breaking the spell. Moments later, the door slid open and Mara Lynn stepped inside, her warm smile a fragile beacon against the sterile lab environment. She carried a steaming cup of tea, placing it gently beside Elias. "You've been at it for hours," Mara said quietly, her voice both gentle and concerned. "These voices, they're important to you, aren't they?" Elias nodded, eyes never leaving the hologram. "They're more than voices," he murmured. "They're lives, stories, memories that refuse to die." Mara sat beside him, her presence grounding. "Just don't lose yourself in them," she cautioned softly. "We need you here too." Elias offered a faint smile, grateful for the reminder. Yet, he knew his connection to Captain Havel's transmissions was only deepening. The captain's logs were a lifeline stretching across decades, a testament to human endurance and frailty. They gave Elias a purpose beyond the static mission to preserve these fragile relics of humanity. At his side, Tara, the A assistant, flickered to life, her synthetic voice cutting through the haze of emotion. "Elias, I have isolated additional log entries from Captain Havel. The patterns suggest a chronological sequence that may reveal more about the mission's final days." Elias's fingers danced over the console, eager to follow the thread. "Play them all," he commanded, the word carrying the weight of a vow. As the transmission streamed, Elias was drawn deeper into the captain's world, into moments of quiet reflection, urgent commands, and fleeting hope. Each transmission was a puzzle piece, fitting together a mosaic of a life lived on the edge of oblivion. The room around him faded until only the voice remained, the voice of a man who had ventured into the unknown and left behind a legacy etched in silence. Hours passed unnoticed. When the last transmission ended, Elias sat back, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They were not just satellites," he whispered. "They are tomes and monuments all at once." Mara reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And you re their guardian now." The thought was both daunting and comforting. Outside the lab, the Earth spun silently beneath the graveyard of satellites, each one a vessel of forgotten voices, orbiting endlessly. And in that silent orbit, Elias felt the faint stirrings of connection, fragile, haunting, and utterly human. But as the dawn approached, an unsettling question lingered in his mind. Could he preserve these voices without losing himself to the void that had claimed so many before? The answer would shape not only his fate, but the fate of the forgotten echoes encircling the world. And so, Elias Trent stepped further into the orbit of forgotten voices, where memory and solitude intertwined in the endless silence of space. The laboratory was a sanctuary and a prison all at once. Elias Trent sat rigidly at his workstation, the dim blue light of the monitors illuminating his gaunt features, and the dark-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. His fingers moved deftly over the keyboard, coaxing meaning from the static-laced transmissions that danced insistently through the speakers. The voices, fragments of lives long vanished, whispered their stories in broken waves, each echo a thread in the tapestry of cosmic abandonment. Behind him, Mara Lynn watched with growing unease. Her presence was a warm contrast to the sterile chill of the room, but Elias barely noticed. She cleared her throat softly, a gentle touch on his shoulder breaking through his concentration. "Elias, you need to take a break. You've been at this for hours. Remember when you used to step outside and breathe?" He stiffened, eyes never leaving the screen. I'm close, Mara. Just a few more hours. These voices, they re-alive in a way I never imagined. I can't just walk away now. Her smile faltered, concern etched deep. I get it. But you re-disappearing into this obsession. It's not healthy. You re-not alone, even if it feels that way. He exhaled, the weight of unspoken grief pressing against his chest. I know. But it's like they're the only ones left who understand. She reached out again, her hand steadying his trembling shoulder. And I'm here too, Elias. But you have to let me in. He nodded absently, the words feeling distant, almost foreign. Mara's attempts to anchor him in the present collided with his yearning for connection across time and space, a connection that only the satellites, fragmented transmissions, could offer. Days blurred into nights as Elias's world contracted to the glow of screens and the murmurs of lost voices. He found himself wandering the empty city streets, the neon lights reflecting off rain-slick pavement, creating an alien landscape that mirrored his inner desolation. The hum of distant traffic and the occasional murmur of passerby seemed like echoes from another life, one he could no longer fully inhabit. During scarce moments of respite, Mara tried to bridge the widening gulf. At lunch, she shared stories of her childhood, her voice warm and inviting. Elias nodded politely, his mind tangled in the complexities of the transmission's snippets of Captain Jonas Havel's logs, cryptic distress calls, fragments of laughter and sorrow frozen in time. He wanted to respond, to reach out, but the words tangled and dissolved. Back in the lab, the boundaries between reality and memory frayed. Elias spoke aloud to the voices, his own words trembling with a mixture of hope and despair. Can you hear me? Are you still there? The faint crackle of static answered like a ghostly affirmation. He was alone, yet surrounded. The shadows cast by the monitors stretched and twisted on the walls, a visual echo of his isolation. Mara's presence was a lifeline he hesitated to grasp, while the satellite graveyard beckoned with its haunting promise of connection beyond the void. The chapter closed on Elias's quiet determination, a man caught between worlds yearning to preserve the silent legacy of forgotten voices. Even as he drifted further from the living, the question lingered in the air: would he find a way back to human warmth, or would the silence claim him entirely? The lab was quiet except for the low hum of equipment and the intermittent crackle of transmissions that Elias obsessively monitored. The pale blue glow of the monitors illuminated his face, etched with fatigue and a quiet desperation. Each fragment of signal was a whisper from the past, a ghostly echo trapped in the decaying circuits of satellites long abandoned in Earth's orbit. He leaned closer, eyes scanning the scrolling data, trying to piece together the fractured stories that lingered in the cosmic graveyard. Another one, Elias murmured, fingers dancing across the console as he isolated a clearer frequency. The voice that emerged was faint yet unmistakably human, a log entry from Captain Jonas Havel, the stoic commander whose mission had vanished decades earlier. The captain's words were tinged with a haunting nostalgia, recounting moments of hope and despair that Elias had come to cherish like fragile relics. Yet beneath the technical fascination lay a growing burden. Elias felt the weight of memory pressing down on him, a profound loneliness mirrored in the transmissions. These voices were more than data. They were fragments of life's joys, regrets, connections severed by time and space. He wondered if his pursuit was an act of preservation or a dangerous obsession that risked unraveling his sanity. Mara Lynn's footsteps echoed softly as she entered the lab, her warm smile a rare beacon in the sterile environment. "Elias," she said gently, "you've been here all night. Maybe you should take a break. These voices, they're not just signals, they're memories. And some memories, they can be heavy." He nodded slowly, appreciating her concern but unable to release the grip of curiosity. "I know," he replied, "but if I don't understand them, who will? These satellites, they're not just debris. They're archives of human experience." Mara sighed, moving closer to the console. "Just remember, you don't have to carry that weight alone. Turning back to his desk, Elias activated Tara, his AI assistant. The soft ambient voice filled the room, analyzing patterns in the transmission streams. Elias, the data indicates a recurring anomaly in the frequency band associated with Captain Havel's logs. The emotional resonance of the transmissions appears to increase with signal clarity. Could that mean the memories are intensifying? Elias asked, a tremor in his voice betraying his concern. Possibly. It may also indicate a risk of cognitive overload for human operators engaging with these transmissions. The A's clinical tone did little to soothe Elias as he wrestled with the implications. Was he inviting madness by immersing himself in these echoes of the past? Could reviving these voices disrupt the fragile balance between memory and oblivion? His thoughts drifted to the silent void, the intangible antagonist, symbolizing decay and erasure. It lurked in the silence between transmissions, a chilling reminder that all things eventually fade. Yet here, in this lab, Elias sought to defy that fate, to capture and preserve what was thought lost. Suddenly, the signal surged, and Captain Havel's voice came through with startling clarity. The captain's log spoke of camaraderie, fear, and an unyielding hope that transcended the void. Elias felt a pang of connection, as if the distant commander was reaching out across time, bridging the gulf of isolation. The moment was bittersweet, a reminder of what was preserved and what was inevitably lost. Elias closed his eyes, the haunting nostalgia washing over him. He realized that memory's persistence was both a gift and a burden, a delicate thread linking past and present. As dawn crept beyond the laboratory windows, Elias sat back, exhaustion mingling with resolve. The ethical questions lingered. Was it right to revive these memories fully, knowing the pain they carried? Or was preservation in silence akin to fate? He glanced at Mara, who watched silently, and then at Tara, whose calm presence anchored his spiraling thoughts. In that fragile intersection of technology and humanity, Elias understood his role not as a rescuer of lost souls, but as a guardian of their silent legacy. The weight of memory pressed on him still, but with it came a bittersweet acceptance. Some voices were meant to orbit quietly, unseen but enduring, a melancholic testament to connection and solitude in the vastness of space. And so, with trembling hands and a heart heavy yet hopeful, Elias prepared to continue his vigil, embracing the delicate balance between memory and oblivion, silence and echo, loneliness and the faintest glimmer of communion. The journey was far from over, and the void still whispered its haunting call. But Elias was ready to listen, to bear the weight of memory, and to find meaning amid the silent stars. The low hum of the lab's equipment was a constant presence in Elias Trent's world, but tonight it seemed louder, almost oppressive. The dim glow of the monitors cast uneasy shadows on his gaunt face, the dark circles under his eyes deepening with each passing hour. Outside, the city was asleep, unaware of the silent satellite graveyard orbiting miles above, a graveyard that now whispered to Elias in voices both familiar and unknown. He sat hunched over the console, fingers trembling as they danced across the keyboard. The transmissions, those eerie, fragmented voices, had grown more insistent, more alive. They clawed at the edges of his sanity, pulling memories from the void, teasing him with glimpses of lost worlds and vanished souls. He spoke aloud, a habit born of isolation, his voice raw and cracked. "Come on, Tara, run the filter again. Maybe we can isolate the source." Recalibrating signal parameters, Tara replied, her calm, synthetic voice a fragile anchor in the storm of his thoughts. Anomalies detected in frequency modulation. Probability of live transmission remains high at 87.3. Elias nodded, but the numbers meant little now. The voices had become more than data, they were echoes of humanity itself, trapped in a cosmic tome. He rubbed his temples, the weight of solitude pressing down on him. The memories of his lost friend, the space mission accident, the estranged family, all of it blurred in the haze of his obsession. Suddenly, the door to the lab opened with a sharp creak. Mara Lynn stepped inside, her warm presence cutting through the cold sterility of the room. "Elias," she said gently, concern etched into her features. "You've been at this for hours. You need to step back, breathe." He turned to her, eyes bloodshot but resolute. "I can't, Mara. They re-alive. These satellites, they not just debris. They re-alive with memories, with voices that refuse to die. I have to understand." She moved closer, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "But at what cost? You're running on empty. This obsession, it's going to break you." He swallowed hard, the flicker of doubt briefly crossing his face before resolve hardened it again. "If I don't try to revive them fully, those voices will fade forever. And I'll lose them and maybe myself too." Mara's eyes searched his, pleading silently. "There are other ways to preserve memory. You don't have to do this alone." For a moment, Elias hesitated. The lab was silent except for the soft whir of the machines. Then, with a slow breath, he turned back to the console. "Initiate full revival sequence," he murmured. The room seemed to hold its breath. Lights flickered, monitors surged with static, and then voices. A flood of sound poured through the speakers, fragmented logs, personal reflections, laughter, and sorrow intertwined in a haunting symphony. Elias's hands gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. "Elias, the influx is destabilizing the system," Tara warned calmly. "This could cause cognitive overload." He nodded, eyes wide, sensing the fragile boundary between revelation and ruin. The voices crescendoed into a chaotic chorus, overwhelming his senses. Memories not his own pressed heavy on his mind, the fear of lost astronauts, the echo of a captain's final log, the whispers of a world long vanished. His breathing grew shallow, the room spun. Mara rushed forward, grasping his arm, grounding him. "Liars! You have to stop this." Swallowing the rising panic, he reached out and terminated the sequence. The voices shattered into static, dying echoes fading into silence. Elias collapsed back into his chair, drained eyes closed but seeing the ghosts of the past flickering behind his lids. Mara sat beside him, her presence a fragile lifeline. "You're not alone," she whispered. He nodded slowly, the crushing weight of loneliness still pressing upon him. The silent void was no longer an abstract fear, it was a palpable emptiness that threatened to consume everything he held dear. But even in that silence, a spark of fragile hope remained. The voices might be broken, but they endured. And so Elias endured with them, teetering on the edge of collapse, yet unwilling to let the forgotten be lost forever. The night deepened, and the satellites continued their slow, silent orbit, guardians of memories, whispers against the void. Elias's journey had pushed him to his limits, but the path ahead demanded more. For in the space between memory and oblivion, the true test of connection awaited. And as the first light of dawn crept through the lab window, Elias Trent opened his eyes, ready to face the silence once more. The lab was cloaked in shadows, the only illumination emanating from the faint blue glow of monitors flickering with fragmented signals. Elias Trent sat hunched before the console, his fingers poised above the keyboard, trembling slightly. The faint static whispers from the satellite graveyard filled the sterile air, their fragmented voices tantalizingly close to full restoration. The urge to breathe life back into those lost transmissions surged within him, a siren call promising connection beyond the void. Yet, the weight of his own fragile mind pressed heavily against reason. "Elias," Mara's voice came softly from the doorway, a hesitant presence in the dim room. "You've been at this for days without rest. Please, you need to step back." He didn't look away from the flood of data cascading across the screens. "I'm so close, Mara. These voices, they re-alive, not echoes, but something more. I can bring them back." She stepped forward, her warm hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Bringing them back won't fix the loneliness you feel. It won't heal the wounds you carry." Her words pierced the veil of obsession that clouded his mind. The memories of lost friends, the empty spaces in his life, they all swirled within him like ghosts. The transmissions weren't just data. They were fragments of human experience, frozen in the vast silence of space. But to revive them fully might blur the line between memory and reality, risking everything he sought to protect. From the corner of the room, Tara's voice interjected, calm and measured. Elias, the probability of data corruption and psychological impact on the operator is significant. Ethical guidelines recommend preservation over revival in cases of uncertain cognitive effects. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing just a fraction. Tara's impartial analysis was a lifeline to rationality amid the emotional tempest. He glanced at the screen, images of Captain Jonas Havel's logs flickering alongside cryptic messages from decades past. The voices held stories worth saving, but not at the cost of losing himself. With deliberate care, Elias initiated the archival sequence. The room filled with the soft hum of recording equipment as the transmissions were meticulously catalogued. Each fragment was preserved as a testament to lives and moments otherwise lost to the relentless march of time. Mara watched silently, a faint smile touching her lips. "This is how we honor memory," she said gently. "Not by forcing life back into the past, but by guarding its quiet legacy." Elias nodded, the bittersweet ache of solitude settling around him like a familiar cloak. He was no longer just a technician chasing ghosts. He had become a guardian of forgotten voices, a silent sentinel orbiting the edge of memory and oblivion. As the last transmission faded into the archive, a profound silence filled the lab. Yet within that silence, Elias felt a fragile connection, a melancholic yearning that would sustain him in the long nights ahead. The choice was made. The voices would not scream back to life, but they would never be lost. They would orbit quietly, a testament to human connection, etched in the cosmic void, preserved by a man who understood that some legacies are meant to endure in silence. And as the earth turned below, Elias closed his eyes, embracing the solitude that came with the guardianship of the forgotten. Elias Trent sat back in his chair, the low hum of the computers filling the otherwise silent room. The cold light of the monitors flickered softly against the walls, illuminating the countless streams of data he had spent months collecting and decoding. Each transmission archived was a fragment of a past long gone, voices caught in the void, circling Earth in a silent graveyard of satellites. The realization that these echoes, once lost and forgotten, were now carefully preserved by his own hand, filled him with a bittersweet sense of purpose. He leaned forward again, fingers moving deliberately over the keyboard. The archive had grown vast, a sprawling digital library of human presence trapped in orbit. Each file was meticulously labeled date, signal strength, voice identity when possible, and emotional tone. The voices of Captain Jonas Havel, the lost mission commander, still surfaced intermittently, their logs and reflections threading through the transmissions like fragile lifelines. Elias found himself listening closely, not merely as a technician, but as a guardian of these suspended memories. "Elias," Mara Lynn's warm voice interrupted his concentration. She stepped into the lab, holding a steaming cup of tea. "You need a break. It's been hours." He glanced up, fatigue shadowing his eyes. Mara's presence was a rare comfort, her pragmatic empathy grounding him when the weight of isolation threatened to overwhelm. He accepted the cup without a word, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. "I just want to make sure we don't lose any of this," he said quietly, his gaze returning to the screens. Mara smiled gently. "And you redoing that? But you can't do it alone, not forever." Elias nodded, the truth in her words settling uneasily in his chest. He was a solitary figure, consumed by the transmissions, yet Mara's steady encouragement was a tether pulling him back toward the world had retreated from. Back at his desk, he activated Tara, the AI assistant whose virtual interface flickered to life with soft blue nodes pulsing rhythmically. Tara, Elias began, cross-referenced the transmissions from the Havel logs with other signals in the archive. The synthesized voice responded calmly, analyzing data. Correlations found between signal anomalies dated March 2042 and voice patterns associated with Captain Havel's last known transmissions. Probability of related event 87. 4. Elias absorbed the information, his mind weaving the threads of data into a tapestry of human experience. The A's insights illuminated connections he might have otherwise missed. deepening his understanding of the satellite's hidden histories. Hours passed as Elias worked, the lab growing colder as night deepened outside. He eventually rose and moved to the window, gazing into the vast darkness scattered with stars. Somewhere out there, amid countless pieces of cosmic debris, the voices continued their endless orbit, a silent testament to humanity's reach and loss. He breathed deeply, the ache of loneliness mingling with a fragile peace. He was no longer just an engineer. He was the keeper of these forgotten voices, their guardian in the quiet void. The decision to preserve rather than revive had cost him much sanity, connection, and perhaps a chance at full understanding. Yet, in this acceptance, Elias found meaning. Some legacies were meant to orbit silently, unseen but enduring. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Elias returned to his desk, ready to continue the slow, reverent work of memory preservation. The voices might never speak again in full, but through him, they would not be lost to the void. And in that silent vigil, a melancholic yearning transformed into a quiet resolve, a testament to the enduring human spirit amid the vast cosmic abyss. Mara Lynn watched Elias Trent from the doorway of the communications lab, her eyes tracing the faint tremors of fatigue under his dark-rimmed glasses. The glow of the monitors cast a cold blue light over his lean face, highlighting the lines of concentration etched deep into his features. He sat hunched before the bank of screens, fingers deftly tapping commands into the console. Yet Mara could sense the weight pressing upon him, an invisible burden heavier than any technical challenge. She stepped inside quietly, careful not to startle him, and gently placed a steaming cup of tea on the cluttered workstation beside his keyboard. The rich aroma of chamomile and honey contrasted with the sterile hum of electronic equipment. Elias blinked, momentarily torn from the labyrinth of signals and static that consumed his world. "You've been at it for hours," Mara said softly, her voice a balm amidst the relentless noise of decoded fragments. "You need to rest, even if just a little." Elias sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I can't. There's so much more to uncover. These transmissions, they re-alive in a way I never imagined." She nodded, understanding the depth of his obsession, but also the fragility beneath his resolve. "I know. But living only in the past, in echoes and ghosts, it's not healthy. You're losing yourself in a graveyard of memories." He looked up, eyes meeting hers for the first time that evening, and something unspoken passed, between them a recognition of loneliness, of yearning, of the human need to be seen beyond the data and the silence. "Maybe you were right," Elias admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "But it's hard to step away when the voices keep calling." Mara smiled gently. "Then let me help you answer that call, but without losing yourself." She reached out, briefly touching his shoulder. "Come with me, just for a while." Reluctantly, Elias pushed back his chair and allowed Mara to lead him out of the lab. The air outside was crisp, the city's distant murmur softened beneath a blanket of stars. They walked slowly, the quiet between them filled with tentative words and shared silences. For a moment, the vastness of space and the satellite graveyard orbiting far above felt less isolating. "You know," Mara said, breaking the stillness, "the world hasn't forgotten you, Elias, and neither have I." He smiled faintly, a fragile crack in his emotional armor. "Thank you, Mara. I needed that." As they returned to the lab, the ambient silence of the satellite transmissions welcomed them back, a reminder of the lonely voices spinning endlessly above Earth. Yet, for the first time in weeks, Elias felt a glimmer of connection, not bound by static or memory, but by the living presence beside him. That night, as he resumed his work, Elias spoke aloud, less to the ghosts in the machines and more to the hope Mara had rekindled within him. The archive of forgotten voices awaited his careful guardianship, but now, so did the possibility of a life beyond the orbit of solitude. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but Elias no longer faced it alone. And in that fragile companionship, he discovered a solace that no transmission could ever fully convey. The voices continued to echo softly, but amid their melancholic yearning, A new note had begun to resonate, one of gentle hope and human warmth. Elias was learning that even in the vast silence of space, connection could still be found, if only one dared to reach out and grasp it. The night deepened, and with it, Elias's resolve. The orbit of forgotten voices was no longer a tomb, but a testament, a silent legacy preserved not just in satellites, but in the hearts of those who dared to listen. And as the lab lights dimmed, the soft beeping of decoded signals mingled with the steady rhythm of a newly awakened bond, promising that even the loneliest journeys could find their way back to the light. Elias glanced once more at Mara, a quiet promise lingering between them. The path ahead was still shrouded in mystery, but together they would face it one fragile step at a time. And somewhere in the silent satellite graveyard, the echoes waited patiently, their stories safe in hands that finally understood the true cost of remembering. The next transmission was already beginning. The lab was quiet except for the steady hum of servers and the soft clicking of keys beneath Elias Trent's fingers. He sat hunched over the console, eyes tracing streams of data as fragmented voices and flickering images danced across his monitors. The stale scent of recycled air mingled with the faint tang of electronics, grounding him in the sterile world he inhabited. Yet despite the coldness of the technology, an invisible warmth stirred deep within the slow, persistent pulse of memory. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose behind his dark-rimmed glasses. The transmissions he had been decoding for weeks were no longer mere technical puzzles or echoes of a forgotten past. They had begun to feel like living fragments of human experience, suspended in silence yet defiantly present. The satellites, long considered dead relics, were repositories not just of data but of stories, emotions, and connections that transcended their physical decay. His mind drifted to the countless voices that had surfaced, the urgent commands of space missions, the quiet farewells whispered in the void, the laughter and fear, hope and despair that had once filled the airwaves. Among them, Captain Jonas Havel's recordings had become a haunting refrain, a thread tying Elias's solitary vigil to a broader human narrative lost to time. The line between past and present blurred as Elias imagined those distant moments, the crackle of static punctuating a captain's log, the faint rustle of a space suit, the cold, indifferent vastness that had swallowed so many dreams along with their bearers. These memories orbited Earth silently, like cosmic ghosts refusing to vanish. A soft chime interrupted his reverie. Mara Lynn appeared in the doorway, her warm smile a gentle beacon amid the cold sterility of the lab. "You've been at it for hours," she said softly, stepping inside and pulling a chair beside him. "Come take a break." "You're not alone in this, Elias." He looked up, the trace of a smile flickering, before retreating into his habitual reserve. "I know, it's just, these voices, they more than data. They alive in a way." Mara nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding. "Memory is stubborn. Maybe it's not about bringing the past back to life, but about letting it live in the present, in us." The hum of the AI assistant, Tara, filled the space with its calm, measured tone. Elias' new analysis suggests the transmissions contain adaptive patterns indicative of ongoing signal evolution, not static playback. The implications raise ethical questions regarding the revival and preservation of sentient memory imprints. Elias's gaze returned to the screens, absorbing the weight of the AI's words. The satellites were not just echo chambers. They were dynamic vessels of legacy, fragile yet defiant against the void. To awaken them fully could mean blurring the boundaries between memory and reality, risking the fragile equilibrium of his own mind. He thought of his own loneliness, the ache of isolation that had drawn him into this cosmic graveyard. In the vast expanse of space, amid debris and silence, he found a mirror for his solitude, a reflection of human impermanence and the yearning for connection despite it. The persistence of memory, like the orbiting satellites, was a testament to defiance against oblivion. Elias exhaled slowly, a quiet resolve settling over him. Tomorrow would bring decisions whether to revive the echoes fully or to accept their silence as part of existence. For now, he embraced the melancholic comfort of these reflections, aware that in memory and solitude, there was also a fragile kind of companionship. Outside the lab, Earth spun silently beneath a blanket of stars, carrying the orbiting voices that Elias had come to guard, a testament to humanity's enduring presence in the vast cosmic abyss. As the night deepened, Elias returned to his work, the glow of the monitors illuminating a face both haunted and hopeful, poised on the edge of revelation and acceptance. Elias Trent sat motionless in the dim glow of the communications lab, the hum of servers and the occasional crackle of distant transmissions filling the air like a ghostly chorus. His eyes, rimmed by the faint fatigue of countless sleepless nights, remained fixed on the array of screens before him. Each flicker and blip told a fragment of a story, a whisper of lives once intertwined with these now silent satellites orbiting Earth. The graveyard above was no longer just a collection of defunct machines, it was a silent legacy, a repository of human memory suspended in the void. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitant, as a soft transmission emerged from the static, the voice unmistakably that of Captain Jonas Havel. The recordings were never perfect. Cosmic interference and decades of decay rendered the audio fragile and fragmented. Yet, the captain's voice, rugged and resolute, conveyed more than mere data. It breathed life into the cold metal husks orbiting silently. "This is Captain Havel, logs from Mission Perseus, day 143. The voice crackled through the speakers, a faint echo reverberating against the walls. "We carry the hopes of those who came before us, memories etched in the stars." Elias leaned forward, his breath shallow, the weight of the message settling like a shroud over him. These transmissions were not just signals. They were a testament of human resilience, loss, and the relentless pursuit of connection despite the vast loneliness of space. He thought of Mara Lynn, her warm smile and pragmatic counsel, a stark contrast to his own isolation. She had been his tether to the living world, a reminder that beyond the orbiting silence, life persisted. When Mara entered the lab, her presence was like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. "Elias," she said softly, approaching with a gentle urgency, "you can't lose yourself in the past. These voices, they're important. But so are you." He nodded slowly, the truth of her words sinking in. Yet, the ethical quandary gnawed at him. Was it right to keep these echoes alive? To preserve memories not meant to be disturbed? The satellites carried the voices of those who had no choice but to leave their stories behind, drifting aimlessly in the cosmic abyss. Elias grappled with his responsibility not just as an engineer, but as a guardian of these forgotten souls. Tara, his assistant, chimed in with a gentle, synthesized voice. Patterns indicate a complex network of transmissions, suggesting an interconnected archive of memories. Preserving these may afford future generations insight into human history and emotion. He watched as Tara visualized the data, a shimmering web of light connecting satellite to satellite, each node a repository of human experience. It was breathtaking, cosmic tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives, suspended in orbit. "They're more than debris," Elias whispered. "They're a silent legacy." The room fell into contemplative silence, punctuated only by the soft hum of technology and the distant calls of voices long past. Elias understood that his role was no longer to merely decode signals, but to honor them, to protect the fragile memory of humanity cast adrift in the stars. As the hours stretched, Elias felt the melancholic yearning swell within him, a bittersweet ache for connection across time and space. The satellites might never return to life, but their stories would endure, orbiting silently as a testament to what was lost and what remained. He reached for the recorder, committing the transmissions to an archive meticulously organized, each file a fragile vessel carrying whispers of dreams, fears, and love. This was his silent vigil, a guardian not just of technology, but of memory itself. Outside the window, the Earth spun quietly beneath the blanket of night, unaware of the legacy orbiting silently above. Elias leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips, a fragile peace forged in the space between solitude and remembrance. Yet, even as the voices faded into the quiet, the question lingered: how long could memory endure against the relentless tide of oblivion? And how far was he willing to go to keep the silence from swallowing them whole? The satellite graveyard awaited, a silent sentinel holding secrets that only the brave dared to hear. And Elias Trent was determined to listen no matter the cost. Elias Trent settled deeper into the worn chair of his lab, the glow from his monitors casting pale shadows across his face, accentuating the tired lines that had become permanent fixtures in recent months. The room was silent except for the low, mechanical hum of the processing units and Tara's calm, methodical voice passing the latest batch of transmissions. Tonight, however, there was something different about the static-laden waves that filled his headphones, a clarity, a resonance that stitched together fragmented voices into a tapestry that felt almost alive. His fingers hovered over the console, hesitant yet eager, as the crackling gave way to a steady, measured voice. Log entry, Captain Jonas Havel, day 47 of mission cycle. The void grows heavier with each passing hour, yet it is the silence between us that weighs most heavily on my mind. The captain's voice was rough, worn by time and distance, but unmistakably human, imbued with the gravity of years lost and memories unclaimed. Elias swallowed the lump forming in his throat. He had heard Captain Havel's voice countless times before, scattered among the garbled transmissions, but never so clear, never so direct. It was as if the captain was speaking not just to the engineers sifting through relics decades later, but to Elias himself, an echo of loneliness that transcended the void. The lab's dim lights flickered momentarily, and on an impulse fueled by a blend of curiosity and yearning, Elias activated the holographic recorder. A shimmering rectangle of light blossomed beside his workstation, coalescing into the rugged, composed figure of Captain Jonas Havel. The captain's steely gaze seemed to pierce the veil of time, bridging the gulf between orbiting debris and earthbound solitude. For a moment Elias reached out, his hand trembling as though he could grasp the intangible connection. The hologram flickered, the edges wavering like a fragile flame battling a cold wind. Yet in that fragile glow lay a profound communion, a shared human story suspended in the vastness of space. The weight of this moment settled heavily on Elias, knitting together the threads of his obsession and isolation. Here, among the silent satellites and drifting memory, he found a fleeting glimpse of connection that both soothed and sharpened the H in his chest. A soft knock at the door interrupted the reverie. Mara Lynn stepped inside, her warm smile a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment. "Elias, you've been cooped up here for hours. Come on, just a short walk outside. The night air might do you some good." He hesitated, torn between the allure of the voices, still whispering through the speakers, and the fragile human warmth Mara offered. Finally, he nodded, shutting down the hologram and setting the archived data to save. "All right, Mara, just for a bit." Outside, beneath the vast expanse of stars, Elias felt the familiar tug of loneliness intermingle with the tentative hope Mara's presence inspired. Their footsteps echoed softly on the pavement, a quiet reminder that connection, though elusive, was still possible. Returning to the lab, Elias resumed his vigil, meticulously organizing the transmissions, each file a precious relic of lives once lived and voices once heard. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the profound responsibility he bore. These faded echoes were more than data. They were the silent legacy of humanity's reach into the cosmos, preserved by his careful stewardship. As the night deepened, Elias allowed himself a rare smile, bittersweet and fragile. Within the orbit of forgotten voices, he had found a purpose and acceptance that some connections would always be transient, yet their memory might still endure, quietly, in the vast silence above. But even as he settled into this fragile peace, a lingering question gnawed at his mind. Could these fleeting glimpses truly fill the void left by absence? Or was he destined to remain forever a solitary guardian of echoes? The answer, like the voices he cherished, remained suspended in the silence, waiting to be heard. The communications lab was unusually still. The usual hum of electronics seemed to dull, as if the very air had grown heavier, thick with an invisible pressure. Elias Trent sat slouched in his chair, staring at the screens that flickered with the ghostly transmissions from the satellite graveyard. But tonight, the signals felt different. They weren't just echoes. They were tinged with a cold emptiness that seeped into his bones. The silent void, the intangible antagonist he had come to sense more acutely with every passing day, was pressing in. It was not a physical entity, but a presence, a chilling nothingness that threatened to swallow not just the voices orbiting above, but the memories they carried, and now, even Elias' own resolve. He rubbed his temples, the weight of isolation settling heavily. Since his discovery, Elias had pored over the transmissions, chasing fragments of lost histories and human stories trapped in the decaying satellites. But this night, the noise between the signals was more pronounced, the silence between the echoes stretching infinitely, like the dark abyss of space itself. A faint crackle came through the speakers, faint whispers threading through static. Elias leaned forward, straining to catch the fading voices. They were disjointed, memories unraveling like frayed threads, a child's laughter, a captain's solemn log, a fleeting confession of fear. Each sound was a fragile reminder of lives once vibrant but now slipping irrevocably into oblivion. His breath hitched as a low, resonant tone pulsed through the lab, a vibration that seemed to reverberate not just through the room but inside his chest. The silent void was speaking not with words but with absence, with the erasure of presence. It was the cosmic abyss, the inevitable entropy that consumed all things, even the stubborn persistence of memory. Elias closed his eyes, images flooding his mind, the satellites drifting endlessly, their solar panels cracked and faded, the countless transmissions lost in the vast silence, the friend he had lost in the ill-fated space mission, whose laughter now felt as distant and unreachable as the stars. A sudden pang of despair threatened to overwhelm him. What was the point of preserving these voices if they were doomed to dissolve into the void? Yet within that dark thought flickered a stubborn ember of hope. Opening his eyes, Elias gazed out the reinforced window of the lab. Beyond, the satellite graveyard spun silently against the backdrop of Earth's blue curve. Each derelict machine was a monument, a relic bearing the weight of human endeavor, memory, and loss. They were silent now, but not entirely gone somehow. Their essence persisted in the faint transmissions he captured. He reached for his recorder, fingers steady despite the turmoil. Speaking softly, he began to log his thoughts, a message not just for himself, but for anyone who might listen someday. This is Elias Trent, recording from Earth's orbiting graveyard. These voices, these echoes, they may fade, but they are not lost while we remember them. The silent void may claim the physical, the tangible, but memory, human connection transcends the decay. I accept the abyss, but I will guard what remains. His words hung in the air, a fragile defiance against the encroaching silence. The lab's lights flickered gently, as if affirming his resolve. For all its emptiness, the cosmic abyss was not absolute. Within it, Elias found a purpose, to be the guardian of forgotten voices, the keeper of memories orbiting silently above. And in that role, he discovered not despair, but a bittersweet peace, a melancholic acceptance of the loneliness woven into the fabric of existence. Outside, the satellites continued their eternal dance, silent witnesses to the passage of time and the persistence of the human spirit. And inside the lab, Elias Trent listened, recorded, and remembered. Elias sat in the low light of his lab, the soft glow of monitors casting long shadows across his worn features. The gentle hum of processing units wove through the stillness, intertwined with faint, ghostly fragments of voices captured from the orbiting satellites. They were shards of a past long gone, whispers of lives once lived, now suspended in a void that neither time nor space could fully erase. He inhaled deeply, the sterile air tinged with the faint scent of electronics and cold metal. Around him, the archives hummed a mosaic of forgotten transmissions meticulously preserved, each bite a testament to a human echo that refused to fade into silence. He reached out, fingers trembling slightly as they brushed across the keyboard, navigating through the layers of data. Each transmission was a fragment of lost history, a captain's log, a farewell message, a static-laced lullaby from a world left behind. Elias's heart ached with the weight of their persistence. They were alive in their own way, suspended between existence and oblivion. Yet he knew the truth that had settled deep in his bones. These voices were not meant to be revived fully. To do so would be to invite madness, to open a door that led to loneliness so profound it threatened to consume him whole. The room was suddenly warmer as Mara stepped in, her presence a gentle ripple in the quiet. She approached silently, her warm smile a rare beacon in Elias's isolated world. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture heavy with understanding and unspoken support. "You don't have to carry it all alone, Elias," she said softly. Her voice was steady, a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. Sometimes, just knowing the voices remain that they were remembered is enough. He nodded, the tightness in his chest loosening, just a fraction. Mara's empathy was a tether to the world beyond the screens and signals, a reminder that connection could exist even without words spoken aloud. She stayed for a while, sharing silent company as Elias returned his attention to the archives. "Tara," Elias called softly, and the AI assistant's calm voice filled the room. "Play the last log from Captain Havel." Playing now, Tara responded smoothly, the synthesized voice tinged with reverence. The recording began, a fragile thread weaving through the lab's stillness. "This is Captain Jonas Havel, logging final entry. To those who find this, remember us not as lost, but as echoes voices carried beyond the stars, bearing the stories of our hopes, fears, and humanity." The words lingered, a haunting refrain that resonated deep within Elias's soul. He closed his eyes, imagining the captain's rugged face, the stoic calm behind a voice that had traversed time and space to reach him. Here, in this moment, the boundaries between past and present blurred, and Elias felt the fragile pulse of connection beat steadily, even in silence. He rose, moving to the skylight that stretched above the lab like a window to infinity. Beyond the glass, the earth spun silently beneath a scatter of stars, and somewhere out there, the satellites continued their endless orbit. They carried the voices, fragments of memory, shards of humanity circling the globe in quiet testament to lives once lived and never forgotten. Elias allowed himself a small, bittersweet smile. He was no longer just a solitary engineer chasing ghosts in the void. He was a guardian now, a keeper of memories, a silent witness to the legacy humanity had left in the sky. And though the silence remained, it was no longer empty. The night deepened, and with it, Elias's acceptance grew. He understood now that some connections did not require presence or active exchange. They existed in the space between, preserved in memory, and in the quiet orbit of forgotten voices. And in that understanding, he found a fragile peace. As the monitors flickered softly, Elias whispered to the lingering echoes, "I will keep you safe." Outside, the satellites whispered back in static, carrying their stories onward, ever circling, ever enduring. The soft hum of the communications lab was a constant companion to Elias Trent as he settled into his worn chair, the dim glow of monitors casting long shadows across the room. Around him, the silence was punctuated only by faint bursts of static and the whisper of voices, fragile and distant, drifting down from the satellite graveyard that orbited high above Earth. These were not mere echoes, they were living fragments of the past, preserved against the relentless void. Elias's fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for a moment before pressing a key to play a recording again. The voice of Captain Jonas Havel filtered through the speakers, calm, authoritative, tinged with a haunting loneliness that resonated deep within Elias's chest. He listened intently, absorbing the captain's words about missions lost to time, of hope and despair entwined in the cold expanse of space. Outside the lab's window, the night sky stretched infinitely, stars twinkling like distant memories themselves. Somewhere out there, the silent satellites drifted in their eternal orbit, their surfaces scarred by micrometeoroid impacts and the passage of decades. They were relics, abandoned by their creators, but not quite dead. Elias had learned this truth through painstaking effort, unraveling the layers of transmissions that had puzzled the scientific community for years. He reached for the archive console and began the meticulous process of cataloging the latest batch of signals. Each fragment was precious, a voice, a message, a moment of human existence suspended in time. His eyes tired, but his resolve remained firm. This was his charge now, to be the guardian of these forgotten voices, to ensure that they were not lost to the silent void. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Mara Lynn entered, her warm smile a rare beacon in his otherwise isolated world. "Still at it?" she asked gently, setting down a steaming mug of tea on the console. Elias nodded without looking up. "I have to finish. They're refading faster every day. If I don't preserve them now, they'll all be gone forever." Mara's eyes searched his face, filled with a mix of understanding and concern. "You are not alone in this, Elias. Remember that." He allowed himself a brief, grateful smile. Her presence was a reminder that despite the vast loneliness of space and memory, human connection still persisted, fragile but real. Back at the console, Elias played another transmission. This one was more fragmented, a whisper of laughter caught between static bursts. It was a brief moment of joy from a time long past, but it carried a weight that transcended its brevity. He imagined the people behind the voices, their hopes and fears, their lives now reduced to faint signals. He thought of the silent void, the abstract antagonist that had haunted his journey. It was more than just emptiness. It was the creeping entropy that threatened to erase all memory, all existence. Yet, in choosing to preserve these transmissions rather than revive them, Elias had found a way to resist that void, to carve out a space where memory could endure, even if only as a silent echo. Hours passed like moments, the night deepening around him. Elias felt a profound calm settle over his soul, a bittersweet acceptance of solitude and the legacy he now safeguarded. The voices would continue to orbit Earth, unseen but not forgotten, a testament to the persistence of human connection beyond the limits of flesh and time. As dawn approached, Elias leaned back and closed his eyes, the soft murmur of the transmissions weaving a lullaby of distant lives and lost dreams. The orbit of forgotten voices was vast and silent, but within it lay a fragile heartbeat, the enduring echo of humanity. And in that echo, Elias found his peace.